Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. Thank you for tuning in. Wild week here in the geopolitical world, which, as I've said, I'm following more closely than Bitcoin these days just because of my geography. Quick update, as usual, on the power curve. Nothing new under the sun for the past few weeks. A little bit cooler than the bump after the Maduro capture, but still, hovering around 90. Maybe you take off the 8, maybe not. I still think this is basically a good enough channel for next year. I don't want to go through what we've talked about the past couple days. Cycle's over. Are they not over? Are we going to retrench down to like the 10th percentile, which is 50, 60K for a long time, or by the end of the year? We're going to have to see. What I do think is interesting is, the power curve, it does hold so far relatively true to what some people recognize as Bitcoin the year after the boom. And I know we haven't had, this could have been a boom, but we didn't have the blow off top, of course. But a year after, we've usually retrenched down to the prior high of the prior cycle before. Okay, so this $200 number was too early in the cycle, and we didn't. This was the first halving, and so we didn't really have it. We did have sort of this boom here. We never touched it again. $30. We had the double boom in 2013, and it's true that that did get up to 200. So you could call that kind of the prior top that we fell to. But basically that's what happens, right? We get to 20,000 in 2017, fall back to 3,000 in the end of 2018. But even there, again, that was above the prior high of 1,200, 1,300 per Bitcoin. And then the same thing happens here. So we get to 60K, even 70K on some exchanges, 70K, fall back to below that prior high of 20K the year after. So I know everybody's wondering, could we do that again? Even though we don't have the blow off top, there's the argument, whatever. But what is interesting is the power curve generally, it doesn't look unreasonable if we have that. That would obviously be pain for a lot of people if we're still, by the end of 2026, hovering around the prior top from the prior cycle. But theoretically, it's possible. So always something to keep in mind. I tend to think, though, since we haven't had that blow off top, we might not have that deep, deep bear this time, especially with the geopolitical tensions that we go into. So, 100 to 200K still seems like a nice channel, let's say, by the end of the year. Good morning, John. Thank you. Thank you for your well wishes. Everybody's okay here. Ukrainians struggling as usual. I'll talk about that in a second, but want to keep on, what we can do to protect ourselves amidst the chaos. I showed this yesterday, but I just want you to look at it a little bit more, just to sort of understand. Okay, so we got monetary base. It's actually the Fed's balance sheet, so it's even, it's both the liabilities and the equity of the Fed, or in other words, the total assets that the Fed holds, primarily which are treasuries, but of course there's gold in here. It's not marked to market, but whatever. Total assets of the Federal Reserve. You can still generally say that this is the printing press. Okay, there's different technicalities between the monetary base and total balance sheet, but you can still generally make that comparison. So if we even take out everything and we just look at the trend, we can say, look, they both have a positive relationship. One goes up, the other goes up. Okay. The reality is more jagged than the trend, as always. And we're under trend right now, okay? At about 27% of the Fed's balance sheet. Still a remarkable achievement. January 9th, by the way, which is the anniversary of Satoshi releasing the code, which I want to talk a little bit about. Remarkable achievement for Bitcoin. So, we're looking at market cap of Bitcoin versus Fed's balance sheet. I've harped on this many times. All right, I know a lot of people were getting into Bitcoin in this period. All right, after the 2013 boom, I'd probably include myself in this. All right. Even though I heard about it here, was not buying. The Fed wasn't printing. All right, they just weren't. This is the most analogous money supply to Bitcoin, and they weren't printing. Bitcoin was still going up. All right, and it was even topping by the time the balance sheet started to go down. Now, interestingly, it did in 2018 as they continued to go down. Bitcoin went down, but then kept going down. Bitcoin goes up there in 2019, and then the madness, the silly season starts. Massive money printing. We align and we go up. All right. So at this point, we're at 14, 13, 14, 15% of the Federal Reserve's balance sheet as the Federal Reserve makes its way to slightly below a $9 trillion balance sheet. $15, 16%. Okay. But even as the Federal Reserve is cresting there, Bitcoin's already making its way down again. All right. So more Bitcoin cycles here, not related. Now it is true. They start to go down together. It's true. But again, what's happened the past 3 years? Federal Reserve balance sheet has gone down and Bitcoin has gone up. All right. Look, I've tracked this stuff as much as anybody, and it's just, I think you just want to be careful if you think that you can time where Bitcoin's going to go based on the balance sheet. Having said that, yes, generally, lower interest rates, more liquidity is fuel on the fire for Bitcoin's interest, and that's obviously where we're going to be going now. So perhaps bullish, but just not guaranteed there. Now I want to show you the same chart, but with the euro. All right. So this is the European central bank balance sheet. Again, it's a power curve as usual because power curve dominates. Here's the curve. Positive relationship. ECB's balance sheet goes up, Bitcoin goes up. All right. This is the reality, more jagged. Notice we're ahead of trend here. All right. Thing here to point out, this is the ECB's balance sheet in dollars. Of course, I could put it in euros. It would look slightly different, but generally you get the idea. Okay. And putting it in dollars makes it a little bit better. Although putting Bitcoin's market cap in euros is also, it's doable. You get the same percentage, but slightly different view. So again, notice here, unless you just want to say that the dollar is king of the world, when Bitcoin goes to its first top in 2013, ECB was coming off of their major quantitative easing. And then they had a whole bout that was different than what the Federal Reserve was doing. And the euro was going up. when Bitcoin peaked in 2017. And then the whole world pretty much did a line here. That's true. Going up in 2021. And then same deal. Bitcoin has been going up the last 2 years while the ECB has been going down. So again, just to show you, like just directionally, they move in opposite directions. What's the total? ECB has a $7.4 trillion equivalent balance sheet at the moment. Bitcoin, 24% of that. Above trend. Above trend. So let's see now. Oh, we've got to zoom out. When we can get to 100%. 2035. Ten more years. Interesting, right? And that it's bit faster than the dollar. Theoretically, at the pace we're on with the dollar, Bitcoin can get there 5 years, 6 years faster. In both situations, remember, the fiat world is still chugging along, okay? Because though this does represent, the core of the dollar system, this grain supply, right? There's, of course, the public-facing money supplies, M1, M2, M3. Those are much larger. They're still going to chug along. But Bitcoin is base money, so it's going to most important to watch this comparison. But still, even when Bitcoin reaches 100% of the Federal Reserve, it would still have to meet 100% of the European Union, or I should say the Eurozone's balance sheet, the ECB. We have the Bank of Japan. We have China. You put all those together, and as I said yesterday, once I can get the M3 money supply out from the Fed, which they don't publish it, you have to back into the numbers, but the data should finally be published next week. I'll do my third quarter update. 26 trillion or so is the global monetary base. And for Bitcoin to reach that, probably going to take another 5 years after it reaches 100% of ECB. All right, so 2040, 2041. Takeaway, as always, is, let's walk before we run here. You can be as crazy bullish as you want, buy all the time. I tend to do it myself, hodl all the time, but these peaks and troughs speak very loudly towards sort of gradual network adoption, power curve network adoption, which, by the way, is still fast, relatively speaking, because Bitcoin grows at the moment 42% per year, although that declines, right, as this curve levels out. It's not hyper-Bitcoinization. The curve itself does not suggest hyper-Bitcoinization. So these are the kinds of charts, comparisons, we'll get more, which I want to keep tracking for you, and also hopefully have available for you soon enough where you can maybe look at your own central bank if you don't live in either of these countries, that is the Eurozone countries or the US. We can look at it in Mexican pesos, Swedish krona, Kiwi dollar, Aussie dollar. They're all going to have their little nuances. you could make the conclusion that the 2017 top was more fully aligned with the European central bank balance sheet increase than the Federal Reserve, right? Because Federal Reserve wasn't doing anything. And indeed, they started to cut it off. So again, I just want to make this caution because I know people like to talk about, M1, M2 versus Bitcoin. I'm not very warm to those ideas. I think it's very interesting to track. It's very interesting to understand where we are. But as far as predicting, what's going to happen 5 weeks out, 6 weeks out, 9 weeks out, no one's going to be able to tell you that. Or if they can, I'm certainly not the channel for it. Let me know if you want to see some other ones here. I want to run through some stuff quickly, show you what I've been looking at. Ukraine was hit with an Oreshnik missile, which is not a full ICBM, I guess, but it's a intermediate ballistic missile. They shot it at Lviv and a town very close to it, and I guess some infrastructure, perhaps some civilian infrastructure, as they usually do. They used this last time, and this doesn't always launch successfully for them, right? But these are Ukrainians suffer. I would view this more as a sign of weakness than of strength, but Ukrainians are suffering, obviously, because of this. Last time they used an Oreshnik was right when Trump came into power. It was actually, I think, post-Trump election, pre-Trump inauguration. Signs of weakness, not of strength. And again, they're not going to be nuking anybody if, Ukrainians kick them out of Ukraine alone or we help them. But I want to talk a little bit about the disinfo that's out there. I'm trying to stay calm. And the world is realigning right now, 100%, and hopefully more towards the good. If we look at what's happening in Iran, maybe Venezuela, maybe, not sure. So this guy gets so many things wrong about World War II, but the basics just continue to amaze me. The U.S. did not declare war on Germany after Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939. It was 2 years later when Pearl Harbor was attacked. And again, this is that sort of that Daryl Cooper, Tucker Carlson, happened just to be that Churchill was the baddie. Churchill as well wasn't sworn in until May 1940. The attacks started in March 1938. The reason I bring up the attacks is because, borders are changing right now. They're changing in Ukraine. Hysteria is rising. Something my father always told me about the 1930s was just the level of hysteria. Something he learned from his father was just insane in Europe. A lot of anti-Semitism. That's obviously on the rise today. But at least for Europe, unlike then, Europe is pretty united against a lot of this fascist rhetoric. It's a question of dealing with Russia. But I'll just keep showing this chart, right? Because it was, essentially all of these invasions occurred before Operation Barbarossa. Okay, so it wasn't like it was Churchill provoking Hitler to invade the East, which is thrown out there a lot. Putin said that as well to Tucker, during his goofy interview, said that the Poles provoked the Germans to be invaded. Same thing where, Viktor Orban says it's not clear who invaded whom. It's just major, major hysteria right now. So I'm just going to keep coming back to this a lot on my stream. So what role could the West have? Remains controversial, and I'll try to give you some views again from us in the Baltics when we were going for independence in the start of the 90s. Re-independence, I should say, after the Soviet Union. So this guy basically would have beaten Putin were he not killed. He was a former governor, Boris Nemtsov was his name. He was killed by Putin. This is actually wrong. He was killed in 2015, if I believe. He is afraid of principled people. He himself is deeply morally unprincipled. Speaking of Putin, he considers all Russians to be nothing, worthless. He constantly tries to deceive and manipulate Europe, to pit Europe against the United States. He is a mentally ill person. All facts, things people should keep in mind, especially during the paging Dr. Freud, the social media age. I'll talk more about some thoughts here, try to stay sane. This remains true today. All right, this was over 10 years ago. This guy was murdered. Putin can only be stopped by the language of force. When even the smallest things are not forgiven to him, but force is applied. It is a great pity that there are no strong leaders in the West, of which I would thoroughly agree with, certainly in Western Europe. Maybe that's changing now. Then the question is how to deal with it. Okay, so we have a strong, quote unquote, strong leader in the US right now. Germans are in some parts speaking out against the actions of Trump, urging the world not to disintegrate into a den of robbers. I don't want to get too much into German politics here, but again, this is now power politics. Like we're going here. So I'm a big fan of this guy's former Estonian president, also American, Balt, like myself. So grew up in the U.S., went back to Estonia, basically helped Estonia become the leading digital economy in the world in the 90s. They were doing digital IDs already in the 90s. It's always very interesting when someone like this, gives open, honest opinions about other politicians based on their experience. He also said Germany owed Russia Nord Stream 2 because of what Germany did to Russia in World War II, ignoring the fact that Germans killed far more Poles, Belarusians, and Ukrainians. Important fact here. Balts, we were probably killed more by the Soviets, but for Poles, Belarusians, and Ukrainians, killed more by the Germans. So it's an ugly history, but this is what happens when you try to both sides evil players in the world. But also, what are the Russians going to do about it? That's what I'm sort of dancing around, and I want to get to now. What are the Russians going to do about it? Because the Americans can only do so much. I think Trump has shown through the first year that he doesn't really want to do anything to Putin. Gary Kasparov, one of my favorites. America's capacity to lead is still there, but its generosity of spirit has been dwindling for years and is now flickering. I agree with a lot of these ideas. Right? If we attempt to rely, Margaret Thatcher quote, rely solely on the United Nations, we shall rapidly come to see it as an illusion factory. where copious resolutions become a substitute for effective action. Probably a very prescient statement. So, if not to the United Nations, where do we look for leadership? It's a question I'd rather just leave you with rather than say I have the answer. Because here's another next step in this chain here. Here's an Iranian, he even showed his passport, pleading to the West to help as they're trying to break free of the tyrannical dictatorial ayatollahs. The Russian-backed mullah regime, mullahs I should say, is now facing a Maidan-style resistance movement. Maidan was Ukraine's independent movement 12 years ago. I actually went there. It was a remarkable thing to see. Led by smart, democracy-minded young people. Sadly, the U.S. is no longer embracing that democracy, the democracy that both Ukrainians and Iranians are dying for. Let's hope this guy's plea to the West is heard. So I agree with all of these sentiments, right? I agree that the U.S. could and should do more, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to these people, right? You have to ask, and it's something for everybody to keep in mind. Like, how did they get into that place in the first place? Certainly radical ideology, radical thought. Further proof that radical ideologies really aren't good in any spectrum, left or right. But what happened to us, if you go back here, right? So we were trapped behind the Iron Curtain for 50 years. And in 1991, when we declared independence, Russians start to come. Actually, we declared independence in 1990, and then 1991 they started to really crack down. The Russians brought their tanks in. It could have been bad. It could have been worse. It's the same thing that Iran is going through right now. And you know what the U.S. did at the very beginning? George Bush was president. You know what they said? This is like January, February, March 1991. They talked to the leaders of the Baltic states because they were all declaring independence at the same time. And they said, you know what? It's getting pretty hot and heavy here. You should put your independence movements on pause. That's what the U.S. said. Berlin Wall was already down. But because we were still part of the Soviet Union, they said, you should put your independence movements on pause. Things are very dicey here. We don't want all these Russian nukes falling into, the wrong hands. How wrong of an idea that was, right? I mean, if the Russian nukes had stayed in Ukraine, maybe this madness wouldn't have happened 30 years later. But leaving that aside, the U.S. actually told us in the Baltics to pause our independence movement, our re-independence movement. You can just Google it. It's not a difficult thing to look up. And so while the U.S. has typically talked about liberty and freedom, and I think generally is a guiding light in the world, this is a weird time, right? This does not, to me, feel like a Berlin Wall type moment. But every day that this goes on in Iran, I mean, for them, I'm sure it feels like it. But for the rest of us, if you're like me, this feels quite tenuous. Will these people actually be supported? Good day, Sandro. Oh, thank you for that. I've heard the same, and I don't want to speak out of turn, and I just probably shouldn't. But the point is, this is kind of, to me, it seems like realpolitik, and I'd rather just rely on someone that I trust more and I know is going to stand up for the little guy. So it's just a German saying something about Steinmeier. Yeah, it's wild. I mean, whether you're on, so here's another thing, small little lesson, and I also want to share some clips I've been watching because they're always helpful. in sort of keeping a level head about all this. So as the Iranians are fighting for their freedom, we also have this language, which I've already talked about enough. I mean, I could continue to talk about it, but again, the U.S. had 15,000 troops in Greenland. Now they have 200. They could easily have 15,000 again with none of this rhetoric. My favorite congressman, who unfortunately is leaving Nebraska, Don Bacon, he's the only one that speaks out, a Republican, probably because he's not running for re-election. To stop the idiotic BS, Greenland and Denmark are our allies. The damage you are creating will extend beyond President Trump's turn. It's already been stated in the Congress, I showed yesterday, that it will be deemed an illegal order by the Congress if they invade. So again, it's just rhetoric that's unneeded, especially when this is going on and when the Ukraine war is going on and this is going on. We have intermediate range ballistic missiles raining down on Ukraine. As I said, a sign of weakness. But how to look at this from like a social media point of view? I want to show this not to get people excited or enraged. I didn't talk about this yesterday. There's more information was going to be coming out. You've probably seen the pictures. So an ICE officer shot a woman who just dropped their 6-year-old off from school. I don't want to go through it, but again, they wouldn't even allow a doctor to come near the car. Again, I don't know, you're treating it as a crime scene by one of your own because, whatever. But if you're hard right or team red, then you're saying that this was, interfering in an investigation or whatever, and even the officer's life was in danger, which that can be argued. And if you're hard on team left, you're saying the lady did nothing wrong. Although, again, it's a horrible situation. This woman's child is going to grow up without a mother. But I've talked about this. I've talked about this in prior streams. You guys can see, right? I mean, this is, to me, Sandra, we looked at this, right? This is the start of perhaps Night of the Long Knives stuff. Like, it's totally different than 1930s Germany. What was it, 1932, Night of the Long Knives? But I said, the moment that ICE starts killing Americans, and they start to do it with impunity, that's when things could start to turn. Someone has to assert normalcy in the U.S. about this. Whether you're on Team Red or Team Blue, I mean, you have to assert normalcy. You can't get up there like the people in power are saying, like, you didn't see what you saw. This was all self-defense. It was all this, all that. At least have an investigation. At least come out there and be normal. And again, why are these masked men out there in the first place arresting people without warrants? So it's very dangerous in America right now. It's very, very dangerous. But here, so I said I wouldn't talk about it. I did a little bit. You get my feeling. Here is a video that I would say is really important. We've had Ryan Macbeth on the show. He says foreign actors turned a tragedy into an information weapon. This, to me, is the biggest deal about all this. Long and short, if you want to read it, 30% of the buzzwords that were used, and he quoted, right, even congressmen, congresswomen, reporters, crazy trolls, these terms, like there was a term legal observer that was thrown around a lot, and whether you're on the right or the left, you were using these terms differently. But if you look at some of these disinformation tools, which I'll talk more about how this relates to our podcast when we start doing more episodes there, 30% were deemed to be bots interacting with these terms. It ranged on the different terms. It could be like 28% up to 34%, but the most egregious was 34%. A third, 1/3 of the interactions that one would have on Twitter with people about this term was a fake person and probably a malicious actor, probably a Russian. He's always putting pictures of the Russians, which I like Russians in their troll farms, you know, internet research agency style. So, again, I would just encourage people to think about it. I try to think about it. You know, it's hard not to be enraged when you see stuff. Like, I'm super enraged when I see this pictures of ICBMs or IMBMs coming into Ukraine. So it's heavy. It's really, really heavy. But also know that they're gaming you. Like, who wants you enraged? Who wants you to click those ads? The hysteria is also being gamed. So that's kind of the other message I had when I was thinking about a lot of this stuff for the video today. Having said that, here's another interview I watched recently. This is my different YouTube channel, but battle lines from the Telegraph, very good. So they talked to General Hodges. He's a 3-star general, retired, usually pretty critical of what he views as overreach and the risk that soldiers would have to follow illegal orders. He's a great voice, I think, in this time. He lives in Germany. His wife is German. He's a very balanced individual, so I'd recommend that one. Then on the other side, interestingly, I don't follow this strategist. I don't know. I've heard him as a journalist before too much, but Michael Scheitelman. This is a Ukrainian channel, which I watch a lot, and he tended to be more positive about what Trump was doing. You know, the fact that, and again, I talked about it yesterday, the fact that Trump did board those tankers from Venezuela, Russian tankers, which illegally put their flag out like mid cruise. That is perhaps a good thing. That's perhaps a good thing, and that's perhaps Trump finally showing Putin that he's not going to be afraid of this sort of warmongering, especially if they were sending weapons to Venezuela. He also made an interesting observation. I'm not sure, again, he said he talked to people about this. You know, who he's talking to, I'm not quite sure, but it could be a possibility that Europeans, as a little bit of savvy political diplomacy, will say, okay, we can offer you more. Again, I'm not sure the leverage of these situations, but he said you can have more security for security, he called it, basically. So you can have more security in Greenland, but this is going to require more security in Ukraine. This is where, again, perhaps my American, growing up as an American, is bleeding in too much. I still want Europe to do way more. I think everybody knows by now Europe's got to do way more. Just stop and stand up against Putinism. But it would be great to have an actual American backstop, like actual American enforced no-fly zones. You know, that's what Ukraine has been asking from the beginning. So, and then one more about Iran. Sorry, give me 1 second, actually. Why did I? Another thing about Iran, which I was surprised, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but the actual sort of Persian population that's left in Iran at the moment is maybe only around 50%. And I learned that from this episode, which was very good yesterday. Very, very good. Let me play it for you guys. Why did I lose it? Shut the window. But to, you know, some cautious optimism about, you know, if they're actually going to, you know, to demand the freedom that they deserve. So this is the Jerusalem Press Club. And this was an American Iranian was on, and they talked about, you know, the different potential things that could play out, basically. And that's lower than I thought it would be. If it's only 50% Persian, and the rest is, you know, I don't know, maybe a mix of Sunni, Shias, whatever. And obviously, the Muslim culture is pretty dominant now in Iran. It did not used to be. Uh, Radical Muslim culture, obviously. Uh, this Iranian American was making the case that, you know, you got to ask, like, how much would they really want it? It might, you know, you might see that after the youth gets cracked in the head enough, which is happening right now, even though there's just huge, amazing protests, there's still, you know, the only thing the regime will do is crack down. It's you know, it's again why we got fortunate that peace prevailed at the end of the 80s and the start of the 90s. It's not guaranteed that that's going to happen in Iran. But again, the question is if this is 50%, if that 50% is representative of only the 50% that truly want democracy and freedom and liberty, or, you know, if it's a blend, I'm not sure. This is another one. I imagine this will become just as famous as Trump's picture after he was attempted to be shot, after he was shot, attempted assassination. Amazing. Could be the rebirth of a nation. I mean, these people are, you know, was a 4,000-year-old culture, Iran. Like, they deserve freedom, and I hope they get it. There's the dictator bingo board, right? So we have Assad down, Maduro down. Khamenei might be down. Putin's looking pretty weak. A lot weaker, actually. I'd say as weak as he's ever looked. But rather than, you know, be triggered by a lot of the stuff you see, whether it's domestic, foreign, I would also encourage people just to note that when it really gets serious, yeah, I mean, you could be looking, 1 out of every 3 posts you'd be looking at is a bot. That's pretty rough. No matter how much people hate the mainstream media or mainstream journalists, I would say these guys aren't really doing their jobs either in some of these online platforms. But yeah, the role of America is going to be interesting here. Trump is realigning it how Trump wants to do it. But, you know, are Americans really going to stand up for some of these international issues, or are they, you know, is the spirit flickering? Are they tired? Do they feel overwhelmed? Gonna have to see. And like I said, you know, Iceland was the first country that recognized the independence of the Baltics. America came way later. Washington, D.C.'s recognition. Although that's a recognition of the re-independence of the Baltics. To be fair, America never recognized the occupation itself. That's something that lasted all from the original Soviet invasion of the Baltics in 1940, June. But it's really wild times. Certainly a realignment is occurring. And the Russian bots are going to be out in full force. Also, another thing I didn't think about as much, this being a Jewish journalist, political scientist, he was talking about how anytime I hear a Russian advisor or whatever coming into Israel, we all know it's an Iranian spy. It's basically, you know, what kind of the opposite of what we see for and Ukrainians see with Russians. There could be Middle East actors that are coming in here that are clearly Russian spies. So spycraft is going to be increasing, not decreasing, and disinformation is certainly going crazy. But I was thinking about this video from Ryan, and I hope to do more of this because my co-host, Alec Harris, who, if you haven't caught it on Spotify, we haven't done an episode in a while, but CEO of Halo Privacy here. And they do major good work in trying to, reduce your digital footprint. They also work on physical privacy if you're more able to pay for that type of thing. But they help private citizens and corporates as well. And he has plenty of anecdotal stories that I think we probably need to highlight more. So maybe we'll do that in the coming weeks and months. And speaking of the anniversary, again, January 9th, 2009, so Satoshi released the code on IRC, actually, if I recall correctly. I think it was on IRC. The mailing list as well, but I think he bootstrapped it originally through IRC. And so that was January 9th, 2009, and January 9th, 2017 was when I started my first podcast. So that was 9 years ago. So small anniversary here. Although it's taken different forms, right? I do mostly economic research now, and these streams do less of an actual podcast with guests, although we have them sometimes still. It's been a while. Good morning, Curious Bitcoin. No thoughts. What are your thoughts? Anything we can do to add privacy, I think, is very good. But it's also interesting. I've heard a lot. Monero has been going up in price recently, and I've heard some even some Bitcoiners. Well, I shouldn't say that. When it goes up in price, you get a lot of interest. But Monero is an asset that, yeah, probably the best privacy coin, but still it's gotten hard forked like hundreds of times. So anything we can do for Bitcoin to increase privacy, I think, is amazing. But you're never going to have the full like level 0 sort of privacy that something like Monero has, because of the need to verify the chain and the need to verify the UTXO count, the coin count. And, on the flip side, Monero, you can never be fully sure that balance, UTXO balance for Monero is the actual balance of the chain. But that's just the trade-off, right? It's privacy versus security. It seems to be a perennial trade-off. Yeah. No, I know. I'm just saying it's not going to solve at the end of the day how the UTXOs can be verified on Bitcoin. I mean, that needs to be like public info, right? And I think the best thing, obviously, people can do is just spend Bitcoin on chain or on these additional layers, L2, L3. And then, if you do got to go back to fiat, I don't know, that's a rougher one. Use HODL HODL. Of course, using exchanges are just fine, but, privacy's all but gone there. Yeah. So, I mean, no thoughts, like it's just as good as, I I can't even comment on it because I'm just not deeply versed enough in it. But anything that we can do, like Lightning, like Chalmian mints, anything we can do to add a little bit more security, privacy for people is fantastic. I should say privacy first and foremost, right? Because the security, at least the security of the coins, is one thing that I think there's really no way out there. There's no way to get around it yet where you can be fully sure that the chain is not being inflated with extra coins other than to have it fully public. You know, and there's been a lot of tries, right? I mean, Zcash famously, Peter Todd famously, like took trips around Canada, bought the equipment with cash, you know, because they had to do that ceremony to start up their own nodes for the original Zcash distribution. And he was trying to document everything that he did. And I'm sure he did it just fine, but he's still in his mind, he's like, you know, super hardcore cypherpunk. And he said, it's just not good enough to be fully sure. And the fact that I think Zcash still has the public identifier, the public coins and the private coins, and you can pretty easily back into what a private coin is based on public chain history. Or have they removed the public Z? There was Z addresses and what, T addresses or something. I haven't. Again, I'm simple into Bitcoin now at this point. More worried about physical security for Eastern Europe. But it is true. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, some of the most vulnerable places in the world are not really physical but digital at the moment. So I should probably start talking more about a lot of this stuff. Ryan's really good. I like Ryan a lot because, you know, he's definitely he's definitely like private property, liberty guy on the right, but he's more centrist as well. He's, you know, he's not necessarily going to be team red, team blue, just Team America, so to speak. Great movie if you haven't seen it. Let me show you a couple more. All right. So again, on a curve, Bitcoin looks nice and smooth. Reality is much different. It's kind of interesting. So you want to basically be selling at these times, right? Obviously, it's just the inverse of the top. But what you see here is a percentage that you would have until today if you bought. All right. So if you bought at the top, you'd have a lower percentage, right? And if you bought at the bottoms, you'd have a higher percentage. Okay. So let me take the trend line off. Let me take the trend line off. So you bought anywhere here, $200, right? You had 75% return. But if you bought all the way back at, you know, $800, 2014, end of 2013, start of 2014, you'd have only, quote, only a 50% return CAGR, right? And it just goes down the way. So it's interesting that still today, you know, we're negative for a lot of people. I'm not showing negatives here. Anything basically below 1 is negative. But you can see that all this blank space means these are people underwater. You won here if you bought Monero. went down to 85K or whatever. This just updates based on whatever the current price is. But the CAGR should be about 40%, and it's going down, but that's still a way better CAGR than anything you can find in the market today, except gold. Also screaming at 40%. Hello, Leon. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let me know what you want to see more of. A lot of people want to see these charts. As I said, it's coming. I mean, actually be able to use them, calculate them on your own. It's going to take, hopefully first quarter, but it's taking some time. I'm trying to work all the kinks out. And it's been good for me actually to update my database because a lot of this stuff is still semi-automatic, not as streamlined as I would like it to be. I'm curious as well if anybody has any thoughts on what's happening in Iran. What did I want to show you? This one I loved. This was from Stephen Hicks. He's a great writer, by the way, philosopher. Very much on the free market side. Fascinating 1979 New York Times article on the Ayatollah, who is apparently, number one, an honest man. Number two, surrounded by moderates concerned with human rights. Number three, one who will leave his internal enemies, Jews, atheists, leftists, free to express themselves. And number four, overall a beacon of hope of the region's future. This is like the Paul Krugman, the internet will be analogous to the fax machine. But I guess that's the risk that people have making predictions. That's why I tend not to make them. I like these trend lines. Let's just look at the trend and see where we're going. You know what I do want to show, though? Because I've been seeing that democracies are falling around the world. And it'll be interesting to see how we can track some growth metrics like GDP or the consumer purchasing power portion of GDP, which is a subset of GDP. That's where, when I say that Hungary has become the poorest in the European Union, it's from that, and it's from GDP. It's from both, per capita, and other things like that. Because authoritarian governments seem to be on the rise. But again, these are fantastic. If the Iranian people could become free, I think it would be just a tremendous thing for the world. Europeans will still print money, though, as the Americans will. But that's sort of the thing, isn't it? Like, this is what I meant to say is, when we were having our re-independence in the 1990s, and again, I was young. I wasn't a part of this. I mean, my father was leading, rallies and stuff in the U.S., but when you start to learn more fully about the whole thing is the powers that be usually want to hold their positions, right? They don't want to give up their power. And though the United States usually sometimes lip reads some good messages, they were actually afraid of Baltic independence. And we now have over double the GDP per capita of Russia. Russia's like $15K a year, and we're all basically 30, over 30 in a couple cases. Yep, let me pull up BTC Gold. It hasn't broken it yet, but it's certainly doing like all new lows all the time. Give me a second. So sometimes I show the regression quantile, sometimes I show the multiple. I'm going to stick with multiple for now. Because actually, quantile is setting a new low every day, but the multiple does not. Just to show you how crazy it can be. All right, so here's the multiple analysis. And again, what this means is these lines are based on the numbers you see in the tooltip. 9.7x, 1.9, 1.3, 1, all the way down to 0.1. All right, so they don't change no matter where I am on the chart. The multiples are the same. And we measure like what's the percentage likely of the multiples. So it is true that 0 and 100 are very rare to happen, right? Like they got enacted. They got sort of activated in these levels. Actually, it wasn't there. It was was it here? Yeah, it was 2013 December. So the lowest one was here. It was falling down from its $30 high. Now again, we're in ounces of gold, so this is all like zeros. But just to show you, on the extreme of the power curve, on this basis of multiples, we haven't hit it. Okay. These are the extremes. So we're still in the channel. Like it's not broken. Just now, it is true, I should say, that these are the extremes and probably very unlikely to happen again, simply because the power curve itself shrinks in volatility, right? So that's why this is not necessarily the best analysis, but it's still, it's going to give you an idea of like, it's always possible that we could have an extreme like historical move, right? So this is the max positive or negative. But if you move only 10% in on each side, that is the 10th and the 90th, then you get a pretty tight channel. And we are breaking that. So 0.3x the trend, which is 65 ounces of gold, and us being around, 20 ounces, 21 ounces of gold right now per Bitcoin price. It is, it's historically low. Like I said, we could always go down to 0.1x. There's no reason we couldn't. But you sort of see how unlikely that is. And I have no problem sticking with this. Like I think this is why I would say, to your answer to the question here, it did not break it. This is just good old statistics, and we have plenty of room here. Yeah, we could keep pulling this black down line black line down a little bit each day. We are, right? We've been pulling it down actually for 2 years, basically, because gold's been screaming. But I don't look at it as anything like breaking the power law or anything. Still 95% R squared. It's cheap. It's cheap for Bitcoin is cheap for gold bugs. And I know I said this a lot at the end of last year, but it's still double the price for gold bugs compared to 3 years ago. So that also is a very interesting thing. Right? So conclusion, yes, it looks less organized, less systematic than the dollar power curve, because the dollar power curve like really moves nicely into the future. And with the Bitcoin power curve, whoops, sorry, we sort of had this kink into the future. You know, you see it's like coming down and then, oh, it should be like here. And so we have to work through that, but I don't see like any big break or like something crazy. Thank you, Jesse. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Yeah, not financial advice indeed, but that's mostly been my move. Not saying that I did it correctly or whatever, but most of my gold has. I'm more thinking about. It just depends on your North Star, right? Gold bugs are very happy right now in dollar terms, but uh, you know, if you had gold here, you could have got Bitcoin for half the price, and I still think that holds. So Bitcoin is more my North Star, and I'm pretty light on gold, to be honest, like where compared to where I've been in the past. But you know, I still have no problem with gold. Anybody hold gold, not financial advice, but yeah, I don't look at this. I know gold has never been this strong relative to Bitcoin in its life, other than a few times, right? But I have a hard time thinking that this relationship doesn't hold. Right, so let's just go to the 10th. See, you know, it's not that out of the question, right? So we hit 0.3x the trend here. I need the evolving trend. So the trend didn't look like this. But it was a different line at the time. So I'm just going to take it off. But basically, this is apples to apples, 0.3x the trend at the time. We hit it here. We hit it in 2022. We hit it right before Crazy Days. Did we hit it here? We did not. We hit it all here, right? So from this lens, it's not like we haven't been here before. This is kind of unnecessary because, I mean, yeah, we hit it a lot, but this like Bitcoin is, we had a much steeper power curve here. It's not as, maybe as big a deal, you could argue, but really from here, we've hit it plenty of times. It's not like we're in, you know, gold's in some astronomical, you know, making new trend lines against everything else. Let me show you in dollar terms. Yeah, I agree with you there. 100%. Let me show you in dollar terms. Just a simple one, same multiple. You might already know what I'm going to show because I revise it with different things. But this one, you know, even with as crazy as we've been and as crazy as the gold market has been, and yes, it's slow. It's takes, you know, takes a long time for a gold cycle to play out. yeah, I think we could go up to 5, 6,000, maybe even 7, 8,000. Maybe we could be like this, right? This starts to kink up. And I need the multiple in the tooltips, but it's 2.5 times is the multiple, right? So this goes away, and basically the 100th percentile, the max gold has ever been versus its exponential trend is 2.5x. So we're not even there yet. We may well get there this cycle. Hello, Bitcoin Polska. Yeah, I'm small position, and yes, I'm always flipping gold for BTC. NFA, never financial advice. Yeah, all good thoughts. Trying to, express that as my general outlook on life. Not saying I do everything well all the time, right? I did not see this as a double top and all the rest, but uh, predictions, YouTube thumbnails, trying to drive traffic, 30% bot interaction with terrible tragedies. Trying to stay away from those things. And this, I still think this is a wonderful outlook, even for gold, even for gold. Um, technically we can go down here. Technically we can hit 8 ounces. That's actually an interesting number, right? Because that's exactly where we were here. When the point 1x was 4 ounces, we ended up bottoming out at 9. Could that be a level? So in other words, maybe that's our bottom number is if it's 8 now, do we bottom out at 16 somewhere? Maybe. Doesn't feel like full exhaustion yet for gold, right? Gold seems people are excited. Remember the gold miner, revenue that they're making now is reaching $400 billion a year. It's never been that high. $400 billion a year. So they all had a good Christmas. Yeah, great point. Especially if you're a gold bug. I think this will be super interesting, right? 2-3 years from now, just 2-3 years. 2-3 years from now, Bitcoin's going to be 150,000 for sure. For sure. Not financial advice. But the trend is 235 2 years from now. I'd be willing to bet you could not get 1 Bitcoin for 10 ounces of gold. That's $20,000 gold. So it's a good point. Well, it depends on your situation, right? Everybody's situation is different. Maybe some people need some cash. some don't. Younger people are usually, happy to take more risk. I really do worry geopolitically, though. Not to bring it too much back to that, and not to be too, again, dominated by the algorithm, but really hope these people can find their freedom. Really, really do. And we know Bitcoin's going up anyway, right? Regardless of the situation. Gold might not do that once geopolitical tensions have settled. Another interesting thing in this interview, Scheitelman talked about how Russia has gone in now and taken Iran's gold, right? Because just preventative steps. In case the regime falls, Moscow will guard your gold. This is gold the Iranian people will never see again. Never, ever. Just like the Venezuelan people will never see the gold that Maduro's gold that they took a few years ago. So it's wild. It's really wild. Wild days. True. Spend it locally. Use, as Curious Bitcoin says, use other protocols, layer 2, layer 3, private Bitcoin protocols, Lightning, all the rest. Use BTC, not cash. True. We're worried about being invaded. That's what we're always worried about. Even though Russia might seem weak to you, they're a nuclear power and they'll do these things if you fight for your freedom. So that's what we're worried about. They're a very rough neighbor. Sorry. We've had experience with them for hundreds of years. I think the Finns have counted up 8 wars with Russia. Lithuania and Poland had a bigger state together, which Ukraine was a part of, and Belarus, through much of the medieval times, right? From, 1300 to 1800, roughly 500 years. They had plenty of wars with Russia, or the Duchy of Moscovia. Latvia and Estonia, we were called, it's kind of this weird state during this time. It was called Livonia. And it was basically a German-run sort of land, just like Königsberg became the Prussian headquarters. It was just kind of this, people see the map and they're like, how does Russia control Kaliningrad now? It's a German-run place for 800 years. So we were always kind of tribal people until, we had all of our language and culture and everything, but Estonians and Lats were more Protestant German. It was kind of a weird state, Livonia. It wasn't like a real proper state. There were Germans there. It was like a church state, a Protestant church state. But didn't exactly have too many bloody wars there. It's kind of like a neutral zone. But the Poles and Lithuanians and Ukrainians had a lot. The Great Northern War, of course, was a huge one, and that was the end of a lot of these polys. Also, Sweden had a lot of power during that time, and then Russia got their more imperial power at that time, about the 1800s, 1700s into the 1800s. Anyway, that's what I'm worried about geopolitically, is they continue to push, imagining that they still have that power, even though 2 in 5 of their citizenry doesn't have a toilet, which I'd like to say all the time to remind people. It's about that. Yep. If you want to know the exact, hold on. Hold on. It always changes every day slightly. Yeah, mine is 15 or 1.5, 1.5 to the negative 17 and 5.78. I think I do show my latest coefficients here. Hold on. Yeah. So I have them on my site here. It's not really the slope. I mean, it is called the slope in statistical, but it's not in a traditional sense slope. Latvia, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, we all have the same concerns. Poland has the same concerns. It's a great point. It's a great point, my friend. I appreciate that. That's why I like to say, don't have to make these crazy predictions, but have some confidence in the adoption of Bitcoin versus all this wild printed money, which you can't predict one way or another if it goes up, if it goes down. The relationship is positive, right? It's a positive relationship. Generally, they're both going to go up together. And it's going to help ease the pain of state inflation, fiat inflation, and you spend more time with your family. Stay optimistic. I think so too. I think we'll be able to win too, but it's better to deter than to fight. I think it's bad. I think it's quite bad. Bitcoin's going to continue to win. They're not going to be able to do something like, CBDC. It's already been stated, right? And I've said it a lot. I mean, you're putting your bankers, your your constituents, which are your bankers, out of business with the CBDC. So that's why they always talk about, okay, maybe we'll do a CBDC with like €1,000 max or €5,000 max. But yeah, Christine Lagarde, she's hardly a financially free person. But this is also the beautiful thing about Europe is it's decentralized. So you got plenty of other states that are talking about doing things. Latvia's talked about having a Bitcoin reserve. The Czechs are doing it. Obviously, they're not in the Eurozone, but they're doing it. So, Latvia. Yeah, Stephen Perno is great. Check out the interview we did at the end of last year. This is an interesting thing, yeah. Let me see if I can find his tweet to show you guys. Well, I can't find it quickly, but obviously, if you guys follow Stephen, great follow, super smart guy, lives in the Far East. Um, and we had a good chat about Bitcoin being dark matter. It's very good. And this idea that, yeah, there's deeper bubbles inside the power law, which might, it's an oscillator thing. I haven't exactly tracked the oscillation of how it can be, but the idea is basically this was a main bubble here in 2011. This was a main bubble in 2013. You'd have to look at it. The 2022 was not a main boom, and so it's a different time frame than the 4-year cycles. And yeah, that's their prediction, or that's their thought that it could be a 2027 boom. I grew up in the U.S., but I am Latvian, so I'm American and Latvian. So I can. What's the word? Traitorously talk against America as a European, and I can traitorously talk against the Europeans as an American. But no, I live over here. I mean, we're right on the front doorstep of 2 and 5 toilet land. Yeah, I need to show. I don't even think I have a 200 or RSI or 200-day moving average. But yeah, 58K is totally possible. What do you think is a catalyst for that? Tell me. I'll try to chart it next time, like maybe next week. But is it RSI, some sort of a multiple? What do you think would be a catalyst to that 58K? Yeah, I mean, they're going to do it. Whatever they can do to keep their power, they're going to try to do it. But that, I hold that fear for everybody, right? A lot of people thought when Trump came into power that, the state level threat to Bitcoin was eliminated. I don't think that's true at all. Again, I'm a fan of some of the things Trump does, and I guess his Bitcoin friendly stance is one of those. But the way that he's gone about it, especially traditionally the way that an American president has not done, breaking all these emoluments clauses. I mean, he's got a shitcoin and he's enriching himself. So I could very much see, I'm not saying this happens, but if, like, we just talk about a catalyst here, what if the Democrats get into power, they impeach him 2027, and, people are talking about how crypto is all scams and frauds, pretty much, which is a lot of crypto, right? Not Bitcoin. And then you actually have the presidential administration being investigated for all its crypto dealings, and then that just drags down everything in Bitcoin. And I'm not saying that happens. I'm just saying it's possible. That's what I think is more of a threat on the market, is what the U.S. backlash is going to be to whatever Trump is doing. Europe, of course, is just stupid with all of their regulations anyway. So, yeah, I haven't read his thing in a while, but it sounds right to me. Everybody's going to, like, not to go off on too many tangents, and I kind of think he goes off on some tangents there, to be honest, but here's what I see. This is a fully vetted, super cool YouTuber. He's got 1 million followers, and he's a very centrist guy. And he's talking about how, look, a third of your tweets are bots, especially during tragic, terrible events. And foreign powers are not, whether we're Western, whether we're liberal, democratic, there are entities in Iran, entities in Russia, entities in North Korea, entities in China that just want to bring us down. Again, plenty of good people, innocent people there as well. Don't dispute any of that. But there's just no doubt that I think, what is it called? UGVs? Is it GUVs? Ukraine now has almost autonomous AGVs, autonomous ground vehicles, like basically drones on the ground going in to rescue soldiers now on the front. I mean, it's all, as it frankly should be, is better. I mean, we're saving, human flesh, except for the Russians, of course. They just send in meat wave after meat wave. But Ukraine is doing all it can to innovate, and that means cheap, effective drones, both on the air and the ground. That's not going to stop. That's not going to stop. So, like, you combine all of that tech, AI, this stuff, the disinformation. I think the only refuge is like public-private key cryptography, right? It's only proving your wealth with Bitcoin or some other public-private key affirmation, right? That seems to be the only way that we get out of this disinformation mess. I'm not sure that Bitcoin is the sole core thing there. Identity is impossible to verify with Bitcoin. You can verify ownership of those funds, but identity itself is a huge thing, and I'm not sure Bitcoin solves that. So, but I think generally his view is correct. I mean, if people have their head in their ass now about how powerful public-private key cryptography is, Bitcoin is, when this AI slop gets as bad as it is, people will get out of that. But again, I'm not sure Bitcoin is 100% of the solution. I think it's a big part of the solution, but I don't know if it's 100%. You still have to find a way around identity problems online, and Twitter hasn't figured that out at all. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, I'll try to get him on. We haven't done a normal show in a while, to be honest, but try to get him on. Yeah. It would be sad. I mean, it would be sad if that's what it was, right? Like, people hate Trump enough on one side of the aisle. They'd love to. I mean, he's just setting the table for a major bear, which is actually the opposite of what Stephen Pernew says, right? That if Giovanni and Stephen are right, that 2027 is the boom, then. But who knows? Maybe the Republicans hold power and don't get too crazy. Jason, you mean? So yeah, I can get the yen, the yuan. We can always come back to they're going to print. That's for sure. Just a question of the short term. The euro here is even more extreme than what happened with the Fed. Right? Look at that. In dollar terms, nearly $10 trillion balance sheet. ECB nearly had a $10 trillion balance sheet. That's dollars. That's turned into dollars. It's less in euros. And then they went all the way down to 6.5. And during all of that shrinking of liquidity, Bitcoin rose in price. Well, not all, did go down here. So yeah, it's totally possible that when they really start to unleash the printing, which is going to come soon, Bitcoin will go up even more. But like I said, I don't want to repeat myself too much. It's not guaranteed. It's markets are more complicated than that. Stick with the power curve, in my opinion, to be better guide, at least on buys and sells. Yeah, well, I think a lot of cypherpunks love it, and I wish I had bought more of it back in the day. I don't have any, um, but I think a lot of people like it, and but you can't verify the chain. You can't be sure that the chain is what it says it is with Monero. You know, I think they still hard fork like every 6 months. That's a modest thing to say, Sandro. I should stick with that. You can't go wrong with hodling. Not on this curve, right? Let's see what our December 2030 number is. Yeah, 550, 553. 553. So remember, that has come way down because of the weakness. You know, if we measured that like back here, by the curve at this time there, it would have been like closer to 600,000. So the weakness in price is pulling it down a little bit more. What do you guys think? Do you think it's a bad year for the markets? You think? I mean, if Iran becomes free, if Russia becomes free, if well, Russia's going to be the last one on the list, unfortunately. But if Iran becomes free, if Venezuela becomes free, if Greenland is happy with whatever happens to them, could be it could be really good. I mean, Trump could pull it off. I don't know, but it seems very polarized at the moment. All right, guys, I think that's gonna be it for me. Uh, Check these out. All very good, I think, shows. I enjoyed them. Like I said, it's been 9 years now since I launched the first podcast. So Alec, when he comes back on for our show, we'll try to do more. I think on the disinfo is very good. My buddy, he's got the stats. Like they have, whether it's stats, whether it's anecdotes. You know, we need to be talking, I think, more about it because if a third of the tweets that you're reading under crazy political circumstances are bots, then people should be aware of it. And stay calm, huddle on, spend time with your family. Good plan. Yeah. Also, good point. They always get what they want. That's a good point, John. Thank you. Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate it. Thank you, Sandro. Thank you, Leon. Take care, guys. Great weekend. See you next week.